ANC faces the battle of turning its public image amid growing public mistrust. The party says it wants to take on issues of unemployment, economic crisis and corruption head-on. The party presented its discussion documents. It comes ahead of a policy conference at the end of July, and of course that's a prelude to the elective conference coming through in December of this year. Joining me now is political analyst and policy specialist TK Pooe to go through and wade through some of these discussion documents. TK, thank you for your time. As happens around this time when the ANC, in an election, in a conference year of the ANC, they release these policy discussion documents, bulky, with a lot of context and background that informs some of their initial thinking, and then they make proposals. As happens around this time, if you are going to read it, you immediately rush to the economic transformation aspect of things before working your way through everything else. I don't know anyone else who reads it differently. I tend to go there immediately. And the first thing that struck me, the much vaunted and punted expropriation without compensation, which was the mantra and rallying cry in 2017, unless I completely missed it, TK, I don't see it here. Instead, I see a number of proposals, including the establishment of an agency that is to deal with land reform. Did that strike you as well? Was that one of the first things that you noticed?
Not really, but in a different way, I'd say. Because if you read because what I tend to do is I always go back to previous ones and then try to see, are they saying anything new or are they basically repeating themselves? And if you remember the 2012 document, that the title of that very same chapter was Economic Development, but it had land reform. And I think you'll see that, as you're saying, it's really disappeared off the agenda of the ANC. Now, one can read it in one of two ways. One, it's a frank admission, what every South African knows, that the ANC has basically bumbled the issue of land reform. Or two, it could mean maybe it's an ideological shift away from land to something else. And what that something else is, it'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, so I see that they are proposing a new agency that they're saying should drive land reform, and it seems to be taking another form, in the form of contributions by various sectors of society. So that whole approach to social compacting, which President Cyril Ramaphosa is really big on. So if we move away then from that, the other key discussion under economic transformation, which by the way is also labeled differently in terms of the chapter, it doesn't say economic transformation, it's something else. The other aspect has to do with state-owned entities. What are some of the things that stand out for you if you compare with what they were discussing in 2017 and in previous policy conferences, and where they are trying to take the conversation now?
No, it's actually an interesting one, because a colleague of mine at Wits, Matalo, are actually writing on it. And look, it's taken what some of the murmurs we've been hearing. One, the issue of the fact that there might be a company being constituted, what was called a single shareholder model, to maybe house some of the state-owned entities. So that's something quite interesting, which we haven't really seen before, and it's something of a commitment. But then when you actually read it, it doesn't really say anything different to what's been said in the previous two iterations. It's always the issue that, listen, state-owned entities are in crisis. There needs to be a decision about what we make. So that tells me that, listen, apart from this maybe idea of saying let's shift it towards a singular company of sorts, there's really not a lot of understanding as to what really is happening. And I'd maybe like to take a pause to say I think it really speaks as a whole of the document, of the fact that I think the ANC needs to always be commended for actually doing this. But then when you really see it, for me, it's as though they've run out of ideas. There's lack of imagination, and most importantly, there's a lack of an understanding that you simply cannot roll out these documents every 5 years as though you're not the governing party. Where is it? Where? Because what's missing, because I normally read it from the beginning, going all the way back to the end. What's always missing for me in this is, where's the update to tell us what have we done in the interim 4 years? What last time you said X and Y about state-owned entities? What reforms have we really brought in? Yeah. And until that happens, I think these documents are something but nothing at the end of the day.
What did you make of the first part where they talk about the balance of forces, is how they like to frame it, and take a holistic look at what the situation is internationally, whether globalization is on the decline, whether there's a rise in neoliberalism, etc., populism, all of those come in. There's a phrase now that I'm seeing in this documents, TK, that talks about the lumpen tendency. It's littered in the first part of this discussion documents, and the ANC identifies this lumpenism as an emerging threat that can easily be exploited in society.
I think we know who to attend to, who maybe to attribute to that too. Maybe it's the SACP, because that language is very much a language that socialists and communists use. Look, as to what it really means in the broader swath of society, it really doesn't really mean much. If I'm a South African who's sitting at the back, what I really read from that is, again, I would say compare it to what the 2012 and the 2017 document said, and it really is the same thing. They give a nice, almost analysis of what's happening globally. But for me, what's missing within it is they seem to be stuck in this language of everything must always be ideological. They don't know, okay, we can describe what's happening around globally, what's happening in the Western society, the rise of liberalism, what's happening with populism. But what's missing is what actually holds the ANC, what vision are they giving for the future of South Africa? Because it's one thing to describe and analyze what society and what the global world is saying, but what you should then do at the end is actually bring it together. And using terminologies like lumpenklasse, and then I think there's also what they do about the understanding where the state is going, where the economy is going. I think where they miss it, and this is where the ANC is really failing, and I think it has to do with if you read subsection 53, where they say that we are no longer, the ANC by all attributes is a modern political party, no longer a liberation party. I say that's utterly wrong. The ANC has not modernized to the level where they can actually understand how society in South Africa has changed and how the world has changed, and it demands that they bring in a professional form of political party machinery, and I think that's where they're missing. So yes, they give that very nice analysis, but at the end, they don't actually put anything together to say, this is our vision, this is how we combat this. And that's what's missing within the ANC, a lack of thinking about the next 10 years.
So lastly then, TK, never mind the next 10 years. Let's talk about the next 2 years, because part of the analysis that these documents present very early on is the analysis that says at this trend and the trajectory that we are on, basically, they expect that, the trajectory points to them coming in at under 50% of the national vote in 2024. Do you believe, having looked at these documents and also looking at what's still to come by way of the policy conference and the elective conference, do you believe the penny has dropped for the ANC about what the stakes are? I mean, to see it in black and white, we've always known that sometimes they talk about their models pointing to them performing badly, but to have them record it in black and white and say, at this point and with this trajectory, we are headed for under 50% for the ANC. Has the penny dropped?
I'd say simple no. The ANC is strategically deaf, as I term it. Because again, if you read the 2017 strategy document, they say the same thing. It's actually rinse repeat. They say society is tired of the ANC being associated with corruption and lack of caring within society, and that is going to cost us ... So what this document is saying is a continuation of what was said in 2017 and in 2012. So if it didn't drop in 2017, it didn't drop in 2012, what makes you think 2022 is going to be any different? Hence, I say the ANC is strategically deaf.
All right. Thank you. Sobering thoughts if you are a leader of the ANC and listening to TK Pooe there, policy specialist, weighing in on the ANC policy documents. And this is what the ANC really tries to encourage, that the conversation should go beyond its own members, but also all of society. You'll find a lot of things that are interesting that we didn't get to touch on, including the whole proposal that appointments to key government positions, strategic positions, should no longer be limited to people who are card-carrying members. Cadre deployment is what the opposition likes to call it. The ANC calls it deployment policy. And the deployment policy of the ANC will need to look beyond, look for what can the person do, what are their capabilities.